At exactly 800 hours, the EP-3E Ares II drifted silently at 25,000 feet above the Strait of Hormuz, scanning the coastline for Iranian C-802 anti-ship missile batteries. The mission was vital, yet routine on paper. Map a safe corridor for the USS Gerald R. Ford Carrier Strike Group before it entered one of the most dangerous choke points on the planet. Then, without warning, the passive detection screens inside the Ares flared to life. Not 10, not 20. Hundreds of fire control radar signals appeared at once, all locking onto the American fleet. It should have been impossible. Intelligence said Iran had only 3 active batteries in that sector, but the sensors showed something very different. In less than 2 minutes, more than 500 missiles could be in the air, threatening to turn the pride of the U.S. Navy into wreckage in the narrowest passage on Earth. But Tehran had made one critical mistake. While Iranian forces focused on what they believed was the perfect ambush, supported by help from the north, they had no idea that a single hidden presence was already operating deep inside their digital perimeter. This platform did not launch missiles. It launched logic attacks. A ghost in the machine was about to transform Iran's greatest strength into a deadly liability. What happens when a weapon turns on the very side that fired it? The answer would reshape the meaning of naval warfare. Tehran's confidence that night was not empty bravado. It was built on one of the most elaborate deceptions of the 21st century. To break the blockade at the Strait of Hormuz, the Pentagon ordered the USS Gerald R. Ford Carrier Strike Group into position. But before the first destroyer crossed the line, the U.S. Navy sent in its premier airborne reconnaissance platform, the EP-3E Ares II. Its task seemed simple: triangulate the electromagnetic signatures of Iran's coastal defense batteries, especially the deadly C-802 NOR anti-ship missiles. Inside the aircraft, operators expected to see maybe 3 or 4 active radar sites along the coastline. Instead, the displays exploded with activity. Hundreds of distinct C-802 targeting radars appeared at once, stretching across the Zagros mountain range. This was the first layer of the trap. After receiving key hardware from its northern partner, Iran had deployed a huge network of high-fidelity decoy emitters. These were not crude reflectors or dummy targets. They were advanced electronic warfare nodes designed to imitate the exact pulse patterns and waveforms of real fire control radars. American commanders fell into a classic intelligence trap: confirmation bias. They trusted their sensors completely. They saw exactly what they expected to see: a massive saturation threat. But in reality, they were looking at a phantom army. And in trying to eliminate those phantoms, the U.S. Navy was about to make its first major error, sending some of its most advanced stealth assets to strike empty mountains. At 0830 hours, the Combined Air Operations Center aboard the USS Gerald R. Ford gave the green light. Believing they had mapped the Iranian coastal defense network, they launched the tip of the spear, squadrons of F-35C Lightning IIs. Their job was to slip through the gaps and eliminate the many detected C-802 sites with precision-guided weapons. But at 0842 hours, just as the strike package crossed the 12-mile territorial limit, the rules changed. Tehran did not activate its fire control radars as expected. Instead, deep inside the Zagros Mountains, Russian-made Avtobaza M passive emitter tracking systems came online in silence. These systems did not broadcast a single signal for the F-35s to detect. They simply listened. They tracked the smallest electromagnetic disturbances and background emissions created by the aircraft's onboard systems. In a moment, the F-35s lost their greatest advantage. On Iranian command screens, the stealth fighters now appeared as clear and undeniable targets. But the U.S. Navy does not freeze when Plan A fails. It shifts to raw force. At 0845 hours, once it became clear that stealth had been compromised, the mission commander ordered in the EA-18G Growlers. If the F-35s could no longer remain invisible, they would be shielded by overwhelming electronic noise. The Growlers surged forward and activated their ALQ-99 jamming pods at full power, flooding the spectrum with high-powered interference to blind Iranian sensors and wrap the F-35s inside a cocoon of static. At 0850 hours, 5 minutes after the Growlers unleashed their electronic barrage, American commanders began to feel a measure of relief. Iranian radar screens had gone dark. The jamming appeared to be working perfectly, but that confidence lasted only a moment. Iran had no intention of fighting through the interference. Instead, it changed the very rules of the battlefield. With the radio frequency spectrum now flooded and unreliable, Iranian commanders inside underground bunkers flipped a switch NATO had never seen used on this scale. They shifted from radar guidance to electro-optical and infrared tracking. High atop the Zagros peaks, passive thermal imaging sensors locked onto the hot exhaust of the American aircraft. Because these systems were passive, they were completely immune to jamming. The targeting data did not travel through the air, where it could be disrupted. It moved through buried fiber optic cables directly to underground launch computers. Then the mountains came alive. Bavar 373 air defense systems launched a salvo of Sayed 4B interceptors. These missiles were not guided by radar beams. They flew on inertial guidance, continuously updated by optical tracking systems, and remained silent to American sensors. Inside the cockpit of Viper 1, the pilot's radar warning receiver stayed eerily quiet. No lock-on tone, no electronic scream. No clue that danger was already closing in. The only warning came from a wingman's frantic voice over the radio. Smoke in the air, 6 o'clock low, brake left. In that instant, the physics of the battle shifted. The U.S. Navy was no longer fighting a digital duel. It was in a knife fight in the dark, while the other side seemed to see everything. By 0900 hours, the tactical picture had deteriorated into near-total failure. The EA-18G Growler's wideband jamming was useless against Iran's passive optical network. The F-35C strike package was being engaged one by high-speed interceptors that gave off no warning. With strike aircraft under pressure and electronic escorts effectively blinded, Navy Command activated its final contingency, the EC-37B Compass Call 2. Unlike the Growlers, which rely on brute force power, the EC-37B was built for cognitive electronic warfare. It does not try to overpower the enemy. It rewrites the enemy's logic. Circling at the edge of the combat zone, the aircraft activated its most powerful software suite. Its AESA arrays began scanning the Iranian coastal defense grid for one thing: the air gap, the supposed disconnect between Iran's buried command network and the outside world. The main lines were protected in fiber optic cables underground, but the system still relied on physical junction boxes to connect to mobile launchers and satellite uplinks used for Russian-supplied data. At those hardware interfaces, something unavoidable occurred: side-channel emissions. Tiny electromagnetic pulses leaked out during high-speed data transfers. The EC-37B found those leaks. Using injection spoofing, its mission computer generated data packets that perfectly imitated the Iranian command network's proprietary handshake protocol. It did not block the system. It slipped inside it. Then the aircraft carried out a high-precision digital manipulation. It altered the IFF parameters inside the Iranian Bavar 373 fire control computers. Through the compromised junction boxes, the USS Spruance was digitally relabeled as a hostile unknown vessel, while the Iranian ship Iris Jamaran was simultaneously relabeled as a friendly support craft. The deception was complete. Inside the underground OGAB-44 bunker, Iranian fire control consoles displayed what appeared to be a confirmed lock on a high-value American target. Trusting the corrupted feed, the commander authorized an immediate strike. 4 Nor anti-ship missiles were launched. But because the EC-37B had quietly rewritten the missile's targeting logic, the weapons ignored the American fleet. They turned instead toward Iran's own flagship, the Iris Jamaran. Iran's defense network, guided by its own automation and manipulated by a carefully executed U.S. exploit, had just directed a strike against its own naval command center. When the missiles hit the Jamaran, the result was catastrophic. The impact triggered a full cascade failure across Iran's command and control network. As the flagship listed in the water and secondary explosions ripped through the area, the OGAB-44 bunker entered a mandatory system reboot cycle to isolate the corrupted data links. That created a 3-minute window of total vulnerability. For 180 seconds, the entire automated air defense grid was offline, unable to process targeting data or issue firing commands. At 0908 hours, the EC-37B shifted into hold-down mode, maintaining intense localized electronic saturation across the communications hubs of OGAB-44. By preventing Iranian engineers from manually bypassing the corrupted fire control software, the aircraft locked the enemy's digital defenses in place. With the air defense network neutralized, the Combined Air Operations Center signaled the next wave: a pair of B-21 Raider stealth bombers and a flight of B-52 Stratofortresses waiting beyond the edge of the battle zone. The B-21s, flying in near-total silence, entered Iranian airspace at high altitude. Using the narrow window created by the EC-37B, they opened their internal weapon bays. They were not aiming for radar arrays or mobile launchers. They were aiming for the mountain itself. The B-21s released GBU-72/B advanced 5K penetrator bunker-busting weapons, designed to defeat deeply buried facilities. These munitions were programmed to strike the blast doors and ventilation shafts of the OGAB-44 complex. They hit with surgical accuracy. The shockwaves from the 5,000-pound warheads ripped through the granite foundation, collapsing reinforced tunnel entrances under thousands of tons of rock and concrete. Mobile missile launchers, drones, and command infrastructure were sealed inside. The base was not erased in a dramatic firestorm. It was something colder and more final than that. It was rendered useless. Its exits were blocked. Its command hardware was physically crippled. A fortress valued at $13 billion became an underground prison. The U.S. strike package achieved a mission kill, removing the threat without the need for a long and costly ground assault. The Strait of Hormuz was open again, secured first by precision electronic disruption, then by overwhelming conventional force. At 0912 hours, even the loss of the Submarine did not stop Iran from making one final move. 9 of the remaining fast attack craft burst out from coastal bunkers and rushed straight toward the USS Gerald R. Ford Carrier Strike Group in a last-ditch Wolfpack assault. Their plan was simple: close the distance to within 5 nautical miles, where long-range defenses would be less effective. On the Arleigh Burke-class destroyers, the Aegis Baseline 10 system immediately processed data from the Spy-6 radar. The range was shrinking by the second. This was a moment where decisions had to be made in milliseconds. The Helios laser system aboard the carrier group came online. Beams of concentrated energy sliced through the night, igniting the fuel tanks of the lead boats before they could launch. At the same time, RIM-162 ESSM missiles roared out of their launch cells, intercepting short-range anti-ship threats in mid-air. The remaining attackers ran into a wall of automated defensive fire. High-energy lasers, missiles, and close-in weapon systems formed an unbreakable barrier. Not a single Iranian craft crossed the 7-nautical-mile line. Tehran's final gamble ended in silence over the water, leaving behind only burning debris and black slicks on the surface of the strait. On the radar displays of the USS Gerald R. Ford Strike Group, the red markers representing the Iranian fast attack formation vanished one by one until none remained. In the distance, long-range electronic reconnaissance picked up unusual movement from eastern air bases. Russian-flagged refueling aircraft and escort fighters, which had been watching cautiously from afar, turned back toward Hmeimim Air Base in Syria. Their presence no longer mattered. The battle was over. Moscow chose a quiet withdrawal, abandoning any thought of challenging the overwhelming American advantage directly.